it was 100-year-old British law that apparently, which was the basis of our excise policies that we found, prevented you from brewing and serving under the same roof.
And more beer can give you lower heart rate.
No.
And it can lead to heart attack.
Anything done in excess is going to give you a heart attack. And you're not going to believe that this was 1993, and my job was to find ways of bringing audio and video into the PC. Most people think that IPA was made by the British specifically for India, for their soldiers and their armed forces here in India, and that's actually not correct. And so he convinced the government of Karnataka, saying this is fresh beer that needs to go straight from the factory to the outlet,
right.
And it's benefiting all of us now. Mr. Malia, wherever you are, thank you.
Hello and welcome to the Fume Lounge, where we talk about life, inspiration, and of course, cigars. We will be smoking Rocky Patel ALR. We'll tell you more about that. But before that, let's talk about Namma Bengaluru. Bengaluru is known for its weather, its traffic, lovely people, lakes, parks, greenery, and of course, for beers. We will not only talk about one such beer, but how the beer changed the beer culture in Namma Bengaluru. And the mad beer scientist behind this is my guest today. His name is Narayan Manepally. Welcome to the Fume Lounge.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing?
All well, thank you.
What is the best quote you have heard about beer?
There's so many that come to mind right now. I'm just trying to think of the best one possible. Let's see. Beer is something that is brewed with knowledge that needs to be drunk with wisdom.
Wow. What is worth more than 2 beers in the fridge?
3 beers in the fridge.
1 beer in hand.
In hand, of course, but all 3 down your throat. But yeah, that's another story.
But you are the man behind Geist beer.
Mm-hmm.
What is the story behind the name Geist?
So when my partner and I, at that time, Paul Chowdhury and I started Geist, we just could not agree on a name. And, we looked at all kinds of names, +91 for Bangalore. And then it was, +91 for India, 080 for Bangalore. We even used the word B, and we said, if we use the name B, then somebody can say it's Amitabh Bachchan, and maybe there's an Indian connection, and all those kinds of things.
B as in the big B.
The big B, right? So
beer ke saath jodenge to kaisa lagega?
Exactly.
Ah.
And then he would propose some names, I would propose some names, and we just could not agree on anything. And then we had this friend of ours who ran an advertising company, and he says, you guys are a bunch of idiots. You have no idea how to come up with a name and stuff like that. And then he said, I'm going to do a presentation for you guys, and I'm not even going to charge you for it. And in that presentation, he talked about how beer is like a personality, it's like an animal, it's this, it's that, a whole bunch of things. Anyway, in that, he used the word Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist, yes.
Which means the spirit of the times. And he actually wanted us to use the name Zeitgeist as the name of the beer. And we're like, yeah, they're going to screw it up. Forget about Zeit and Geist and stuff. But what we did know is that we wanted a foreign sounding name, because at that time, at least, when we started, the common misconception was that ye Indians kya jante hai beer banane mein, they know nothing about it, because it was always Germany or the US or the Czech Republic or Belgium or one of those countries.
Or Mr. Malia.
So, yeah, and Mr. Malia for sure. But, we wanted a foreign sounding name because we were like, not sure whether a Indian name would give us the premium dollars that we were demanding. So we lopped off Zeit, and in between we came up with something called Beer Geist, because it's like the spirit of the beer times or whatever.
Right.
And they were like, too complicated. So just lop off everything, just say Geist. So it kind of fit the criteria of sounding foreign, but also that was the only thing that he and I could agree on. And he was half Bengali, half German, so I guess it worked for him. So.
No, it's a great story, and Zeitgeist is occasionally used in Google as well.
Yeah.
means the spirit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It also means ghost. And somebody also mentioned that apparently in some dialect in Germany, in the south of Germany, in Bavaria, Geist also means endurance. Now,
Okay.
honestly, I've never heard this before, but somebody did mention and said that that was actually endurance. And given the trials and tribulations that we had going through this entire business up to that point, we're like, yes, yes, it kind of makes sense.
But what is beer for you?
To
apart
me,
from apart from a business, of course.
Yeah.
But what is beer for you?
truthfully, and I know this sounds a little hackneyed when I say this, but it truly, to me, means happiness. Because when I drink a well made beer, how it makes me feel is just absolute happiness to know that somebody had put in knowledge and wisdom to produce this beer that I'm enjoying in my hands right now. It's literally for that moment that beer goes down your gut through your esophagus and hits your belly. It's just that the aroma, the look of the beer, the taste of the beer, it's total happiness to me. If I have to define it in one word, it's happiness.
You made drinking beer so cinematic right now. It is so beautiful. But the first beer, whenever you have, if you have plans with your friends or you're coming back from work or something, but the first beer, when the cold stream goes down, it is just amazing.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
And coupled with that, every great beer that I've had, I remember exactly where I was. So, for example, the very first time I tried a non-conventional beer, and I was working with Intel, and I was sent to Belgium to work with a telecom company called Alcatel.
Okay.
And I had to integrate our products into their telecom switches. So we did work with them. It was a longish project, but I remember one evening, we said, okay, we're going to celebrate. It was a Friday evening. So we all went to the terrace of their building, and they had this beer called Westmalle, which is this Belgian triple made by Trappist monks. And I have to tell you, I get goosebumps even now when I think about that moment. It was just spectacular. And you'd worked hard and you just drank this thing and you're like, oh my gosh, this is absolute perfection. I'm truly, truly happy at this moment.
I remember the most we enjoyed drinking beer was right after lockdown, because alcohol was not available and everybody was craving beers, because beers people didn't have. They had other alcohol at home. So the shops opened up. We got 2 crates. And between 4 of us, that night, we finished some 36, 38 beers.
Hopefully some of that was Geist. No, actually, we weren't in cans at that time. So yeah never mind.
You were not in the bottles that time.
Yeah.
But that's a good story about lockdown as well. We'll come to that. But tell me, how do you like your beer? With head, without head?
To me, a beer without head is honestly not an enjoyable experience. It is a well-made beer. And by the way, at the brewery, we call it the good relationship head, right?
Good relationship head.
Good relationship. It means that the head should last till the end like a good relationship or like a good marriage. So head is critical because I think it also shows a well-made product.
Okay.
To show that somebody's taken care to make sure that those proteins are exhibited. That means your process is under control. The beers are fresh. The glass is clean. All of those things. So having a good head on the beer is essential.
Beer denotes friendship as well. And one punishment turned into a friendship with Paul Chaudhary when you were in 4th standard. You were in 4th standard. Paul was made to sit with you as a mark of punishment. And then the friendship is not just a friendship. It is it's a business partnership now.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, Paul, by the way, is this incredibly good-looking guy, and he has all the right genes. Great Bengali genes and great German genes. And this kid was a really good-looking kid, and he was very, very popular. Us were South Indians, background mein the, and so I don't know how this happened, but yes, he was I think he misbehaved in class or said something, and he was made to sit next to me. Now, of course, we got talking and we were friends, but we were never really thick as thieves as friends. And he had his own set of cool friends, and I was not part of that group at that time.
Acha.
So it was not part of the group. And we would meet on and off, and he was always very gracious. And and by the way, his father and my father worked at Tata Motors in those days called Telco.
Right.
They worked together, and both moved to Bangalore. And our friendship kind of, we were always friends, but never really thick friends. Where things changed was he came back from the US. He's an engineer, mechanical engineer, industrial engineer. And I came back. I was electrical. And I met him at a 25th year reunion of St. Joseph's Boys High School.
Right.
And then he comes to me and says, hey, by the way, my nickname also was Nari for Narayan. So he said, Nari, I heard you're doing something weird. So can I come and work with you till I find a real job? That's what he said.
Yeah, he quit his job.
So he was working with VA Linux and Hewlett Packard and a whole bunch of companies. I was only with Intel. We both came back. And then he said, can I come and work with you till I get a real job? So I said, sure. I mean, I of course I could use the help. And then he started. And then, we got along really well. Of course, the business at that time, we were trying to figure out what the heck we're going to do with craft beer and we're going to take this. And our plan was to open a microbrewery. And every place we turned to, we couldn't get licenses. Laws were not there. Excise amendments were not in place, blah, blah, blah. But there was another moment where he had a family business. And his father had passed away, unfortunately, by that time. But his mother said, you got to make a choice. Either you come and work in the family business or you do beer. You decide.
Okay.
And he overwhelmingly voted to stay with beer. So, yeah. And, we're still friends. Even though he's not part of the company right now, we're still very good friends. And, that's a friendship of a lifetime.
That's a great story. But what is friendship for you?
I think to me, a friendship is about something meaningful, something deep, something not artificial, something where I know that no matter what happens, whether I haven't spoken to that person for a long time or not,
right,
I know that person's going to be there for me. And I know that even if I have not spoken to him or her for a long time, the minute you meet, you pick up from wherever you left off, like nothing changed, and like you're always together.
Like this, I've seen that, and that is when I realized that this is what true friendship is all about.
Yeah, and you have multiple friends, but there is a core set of friends, those 5, 6, 7 people, whatever the number is,
right,
that you feel this way, right? And you know that you don't have to have your guard up. You don't have to pretend to be somebody else. You can be yourself. You can do whatever the F you want. And it doesn't really matter because that relationship runs so deep.
Well, behind that soft-spoken voice, there is also wild side. And while growing up, of course, there's a radioactive story.
How did you find out about that? But anyway, so I remember, so we were at Paul's house. He lived in Alsur, Cambridge layout. And we, as kids, wanted to kind of learn new things, break things open, or tear them apart. And I remember we opened his parents' radio. And in those days, there were no solid state devices. There were all these valves and diodes that were all made of glass.
Right.
We didn't know what the heck we were doing. And we thought we're going to take this apart and see what's going on and stuff. And so I remember we didn't even have the brains to turn off that damn radio when we took this thing apart. Okay. And the thing was on. So we pulled out one of the diodes and this thing went push. And you could just see this white smoke, on the PCB.
Right.
And then he and I ran out of the room saying radioactivity.
That is why you guys decided to be engineers?
No, I think for me, by the way, strangely enough, the very first admission I got was in hotel management, believe it or not.
Okay.
I had admission with a scholarship, I don't know why, in some university in Switzerland.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had admissions in college here. But I guess given the background, and for us, we came from very, 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 modest beginnings.
Right.
And at least at that time, the theory was that if you had to get a good job, you either had to be a doctor or an engineer. So honestly, I didn't have much choice whether I wanted to do something different or not. The choice was not there. So it was just natural that you didn't want to disappoint your parents and you did engineering.
Otherwise, you would be sitting in New Zealand and...
Yeah, truthfully, I don't know what I would have become. But given my passion for cooking and making cheese and a whole bunch of things, I think it was... I probably would have landed up in the F&B industry. So it's ironical that I'm kind of somehow connected to the F&B industry now, even though this came through a very convoluted route.
Right. But this journey started from the US and then Belgium. You were
not in Belgium. I was primarily in the US.
Right.
Yeah. And then, of course, Belgium after I came back to India.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were in IT at a very senior position. Of course, Intel you're working with. How did you think of making beers?
Yeah. So interesting story. So I went for my master's to Virginia Tech, and then I got hired into a research group in Princeton, New Jersey.
Right.
That was called PRO. It's called the Princeton Research Operation. And you're not going to believe that this was 1993. And my job was to find ways of bringing audio and video into the PC.
Okay.
And the group, this is the smartest group of people I've ever worked with in my life. They were just spectacular engineers. They were just ridiculously good. And so these guys were trying to work on how the heck do you bring audio and video into the PC? Because somehow you knew that video and audio is going to be important. And at that time, the state-of-the-art chip was a 386, Intel 386. And so I remember we had 7 different boards. There was a pixel processor, there was a display processor, there was a compression engine, there was a decompression engine, there was a whole bunch of stuff in boards that you had to put inside of a PC.
Right.
And if you remember in the old days, those PCs were like big and thick, and you had all these, ATX boards that you had to put in, etc. And then Andy Grove was our CEO at that time, and one of the most amazing human beings I've ever seen in my life. I mean, literally, if you see this guy, you felt like there was an electric kind of aura and current around him. He was that amazing.
Right.
So he comes into PRO and he says, "What is all this bullshit, non-real-time stuff? I want real-time stuff." And he has this thick Hungarian accent, right? So he wanted something real-time on this PC. And then he also said, "I don't want you guys to use all these boards. I want you to use as much as you can on the main processor." At that time, you really couldn't understand why he was doing what he was doing. But obviously now, when you look back, he wanted to give people a reason to buy bigger and bigger chips. 386, 486, Pentium, etc., etc., etc.
Right.
And so the group worked on, the challenge was get something real time going, because until then they would take video, they would compress it, and then you could play it back, right? It was non-real time stuff. So me and another guy were told to go figure out and say, come up with a project for something that's real time.
Right.
And so our boss at that time, it was Al Korenjak. So the three of us sitting and figuring out what do we do? So it was like, hey, let's do video conferencing. So that was a real-time project that I was working on. And that surprisingly worked. So we had Zoom working in 1993.
Okay.
At the end of 1993. It was called Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks.
Twin Peeks, because at that time there was a TV show called Twin Peaks.
Okay.
Like two mountains.
Right.
So this was called Peeks, like in peaks, you're peeking at each other. So that was a project. And that got transferred to Portland, Oregon by Andy, because he was ape shit about this stuff. He was like, no, this is amazing. So he invested $600 million in this project. And this project got transferred to Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
Now, this was 1993. I wasn't married. And the group of engineers was working in Portland, fabulous people. And I had no friends. And I realized that every one of my group members were making beer. So I'm like, So
Okay.
can I come and make beer with you
At
guys?
Portland.
At Portland. In Oregon, you're allowed to make 30 liters of beer without a license, free of cost,
Okay.
as long as you don't sell it.
Wow, it's
Okay.
like a
It's a
city with
massive
homebrews.
industry. Yeah, just every house had a homebrewing piece of equipment in it. And people made amazing beers by the way.
Right.
So I got into this because I just wanted to bond with the guys. I was the only Indian guy in the group. I wanted to bond with my team members, and I started making beer. And then I built a brewery in my garage, brewed many, many batches of beer, and fast forward to where we are today.
For all of $65.
$65 worth, yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that moment, by the way.
remember.
I remember that moment so clearly. It was Main Street Homebrew, and the guy who sold us the equipment, his name was Kevin, and he was a PhD in microbiology.
Wow.
And this guy was giving us gyan about fermentation, and I'm like looking at him wide-eyed, mouth open. And I said, "What made you quit and do this?" He says, "Because I love it." I'm like, "Wow, that's so cool."
You're like the ideal friend and ideal husband who never forget dates, birthdays.
Anything beer
anniversaries.
related, I won't forget, but anything in the house, I forget. So
Do you have fights at home?
all the time.
What is the main cause of fight?
I don't remember dates.
Any particular reason?
No, I think so my wife's biggest complaint, she says, I am the second wife, the first wife is Geist.
Wow.
So, and she's right, because for me, this is an
As long as
all-consuming.
that is your first wife.
Yeah, nobody else is stupid enough. So,
But what is the process of making beer? So you brewed in your garage.
Mhm.
What is the process of brewing a beer? I know you take malt, you crush it with warm water, you put yeast in that. It will take out the alcohol. Then you put hops, and your beer is ready.
yeah, so a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But first off, the question is, what is malt in the first place? Right. So if you
Right.
take barley or wheat, barley and wheat have a carbohydrate reserve,
Right.
which is basically a part of the grain called the endosperm. The endosperm is a carbohydrate reserve. Now you have to realize that Mother Nature, which is my only God that I believe in, by the way, has endowed in that seed intelligence to say your job is to grow 2 leaves above the ground. That's your job. Now, this is magic of Mother Nature. So the seed, when you put it into the ground, the first thing it starts to do is to sprout. In the process of sprouting, it starts to break down all of the barriers and walls, if you might, to this carbohydrate reserve. And that carbohydrate reserve is essentially complex carbohydrates. When you start breaking it down by the addition of water, that complex carbohydrate starts to break down into simpler carbohydrates. Why? Because glucose is energy.
Right.
You need the energy to put those 2 leaves above the ground.
Right.
So it starts to break down a layer called beta glucanase, which is effectively like a shield or a cover to this carbohydrate reserve. And it starts to convert all those complex carbohydrates into simpler carbohydrates. This is the process of malting. So just at the point where the roots starts to develop on the grain is when you stop the malting process.
Right.
So malting is nothing other than sprouting or controlled sprouting.
Right.
And all of us have had sprouted dal or sprouted bhaji or whatever else in our lives. We have it all the time.
Right.
That is a process of malting. So now you don't want to have too much of that root come in or too less of the root come in. You just have to have the optimal amount where you know that the grain has, the carbohydrate reserve has converted from complex to simpler. Anyway, you take that malt and you break it open. And when you break it open, you then mix, like you said, warm water. What happens with that warm water is natural enzymes that are present in the malt start to break down the simpler carbohydrates into much, much simpler sugars.
Right.
Glucose, maltose, maltotriose, maltodextrose, dextrose, maltotriose, maltotetrose, and other non-fermentable sugars.
Right.
And you can control this, by the way. You can figure out how much you want of each. Anyway, this is now sugar water, right? This sugar water is then separated from the husk through, think of it as a glorified chalni. It's called a
Right.
lauter tun.
It is filtered.
You filter
into
it
the
out,
tanks.
right? Then you take that and then you boil it. When you boil it, you kill bacteria. And then you also start adding hops. And hops, when you add hops during the boil process, it's a process called isomerization, where you actually start to mix it properly, right? And depending on when you add the hops, you can get more bitter beer or more aromatic beer. And now this is called, no, not beer yet, it's called wort. And then again, you remove as much of this through filtration. Filtration, matlab, it's called a whirlpool. You take as much of the solids out. You get clearer liquid, which you then cool down, send into a fermenter and add yeast. The yeast eats the sugar and gives you ethanol and carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide is kind of absorbed back in the beer to give the beer its fizz. That's the process of making beer.
Wow. He's getting excited. He's a whiskey distiller.
By the way, to make whiskey, you need to make beer first.
Yes, of course. And then it goes to copper stills.
Yeah.
You evaporate at 100, 200 degrees. Then condensation happens.
Exactly.
And then what you get is out of a 7% alcohol, you get 65% alcohol.
Correct. So you get multiple stages, right? You do single distillation, double distillation, triple distillation, etc. And the concentration of alcohol improves more and more. And so you get from 8% to 14%, 14 to 65, or 14 to 65-ish. And then you kind of still it down to something like 49 odd percent. 48, 49. But
what is the role of hops in this? So a lot of people when they drink, and if they know what is a hops, they think it is for the bitterness. So what is the hops basically for? What is the basic function of hops?
Yeah. So hops gives the beer aroma. It gives the beer bitterness, but it's also pure polyphenol. So it actually acts as a preserving agent to the beer, as a preservative, a natural preservative.
Okay.
And by the way, polyphenols are really good for you. And, all the recent science now says polyphenols helps in reducing anti-radicals in your body and all that kind of stuff. So don't worry about all the supplements. Just drink a nice hoppy beer and you're good.
A beer.
A beer. Well, depends on your size, but maybe two.
What are the hops you're using? Where are these hops coming from in India?
So 40% of the world's hops is made in the United States, in an area called Yakima Valley, which is south of Seattle.
Right.
So 40%, that's a huge number. The rest comes from multiple areas. And by the way, they're all in the latitudes 55 to 75 in the Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. So it includes countries like Czech Republic, Germany, parts of Slovenia, parts of Eastern Europe, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, etc., that kind of belt. But this is primarily where the hops come from. We buy it typically from the United States, from Yakima Valley, and then also from Germany for our German beers.
And you told me something about hops in the US, where US takes the best crop.
Yeah, so the thing is this. So as Indian brewers, right, we are dealing with a double jeopardy situation. The first jeopardy is that Mother Nature, obviously because of climate, rains, sunshine, etc., the crop varies year on year, year on year. It's never the same.
Right.
So for example, every hop has something called alpha acid. It's about the amount of bitterness that it can impart into beer. That varies over time for the exact same hop, right? So 13.8% can become 13.4, it can become 12.9, it can become a whole bunch of things, right? So not only do you have to adjust to that, it also depends upon, maybe it's a triple jeopardy situation. That also depends upon early season pick, which gives the hops like onion, garlicky, not so desirable flavor. Then there's a mid-season pick, and there's a late season pick. The late season pick, of course, gives you things like deeper berries, dried fruit, that kind of stuff coming through. What you typically want is the mid-season pick, right?
Okay.
But trying to access that lot where you've got bunch of American brewers who have immediate access to Yakima Valley farmers and cooperatives that we don't have. So that's kind of one issue. The second issue is many of the larger breweries in the United States will go into hop fields and they'll say, okay, I want this acreage for my brewery and you can't sell this crop to anybody else.
Okay.
Right? And they contract out for the entire year.
Okay.
So for us, you're dealing with variances in Mother Nature. You're dealing with not getting access to mid-season pick, and you're dealing with the fact that you don't have immediate contact with the growers or the cooperatives that the American brewers have. So we have to be that much more creative, if you might, to try to maintain a consistent product. We don't always get it right, but we try as hard as we can. Because at the end of the day, you want customers to feel the promise of the brand. When we say Geist, Kama, Citra, it has to mean something to somebody.
Right.
And they've made their assumption saying this beer has to taste like this. Now, if it's all over the map, people are going to say, yeah, what is this? It's not living up to its promise. So that's where, like I said, performance driven through science comes in. You have to have knowledge, technical information, scientific understanding in order to put out a consistent
Right.
product.
What about growing hops in India? Are people growing hops in India? Is there like opportunity for the farmers to grow hops in India and sell it? It's going to be a new business avenue for people.
So the answer is, yes and no. What I mean by that is this: there are only certain areas in India that meet the criteria for growing hops.
Which
right?
are the
Which
areas?
are primarily, it was Kashmir in the early days, but now because of various religious reasons, it's no longer allowed to be grown. Now you have foothills of the Himalayas, which is Uttarakhand, Himachal, those areas
Right.
that hop growing is possible, and it is being grown, but they grow lower quality hops for mass market beer.
Okay.
Right? You also need 15 hours of daylight, and you also need frost-like conditions during harvest time. So there's a whole bunch of criteria that have to come in, but only very, very few places in India meet the criteria.
But why the low quality? Is it because people are not giving more attention to it? Because we get high quality marijuana growing in Himachals and in foothills.
Yeah.
And if you say if it is from the same family, probably hops is not given that much of attention.
It has to do with demand. Indians are, we are at the core of it, we're entrepreneurs, right? If there is demand, trust me, somebody's going to find a way to make it for you. Today, craft beer, which demands this premium quality hops,
Right.
is just less than 1% of the overall market. Now, is it going to be relevant in the future? Of course it is. India is premiumizing. People are wanting better beers. They are wanting better whiskeys. They're wanting better cigars, all of that. So that trend is happening. We are the fastest growing GDP in the world. Our disposable incomes are growing. We're eating better. We're buying better for ourselves, etc. So that it's going to happen. The question is, when are people going to invest when they see a sizable market?
But there is a market.
Of course, there's a market, but then the market's going to become bigger and bigger. Today, it's only 1%.
Okay.
Tomorrow, it's going to become significant. And that is when I believe a lot of these farmers are going to start experimenting with, or entrepreneurs for that matter, working with farmers to get better quality hops made. I know there are some really enterprising entrepreneurs who've started growing hops in cold rooms, apparently somewhere in Maharashtra.
Okay.
Now, how successful that experiment is going to be, I don't know. But having a cold room to grow volume, hops, it's going to be expensive.
Or they're growing something else in the shadow of hops.
Well, I don't know. I all I know is growing hops. So.
Where are your hops coming from?
Basically, in a place called Yakima Valley, which is south of Seattle, and then from the Hallertau region and other regions in and around that area, which is South Germany. Primarily we've sourced hops. We source hops today primarily from the United States and Germany, but we've also sourced from Slovenia, from the Czech Republic, New Zealand, Australia, etc.
That's how you get the hoppy ending.
A hoppy ending. Yeah.
We'll move on to yeast.
Uh-huh.
Another major ingredient in making alcohol. And you said you even chat with yeasts.
Yeah. So yeast, I think, is one of the most underrated and least, or the ingredient that's given the least importance, right? The issue with yeast is this. Yeasts are living organisms. They have feelings. They get upset. They get stressed. They get angry. You can see all this stuff.
Okay.
For example, when they're stressed, they give you sulfurous compounds, right? Sulfur basically in the beer, which is not pleasant to drink. But the yeast is telling you and saying, I'm not happy. You gotta do something better for me, right? And so that's one. Now, if you make the yeast too happy, then it's almost like human beings where they'll say, the other guy's going to do the job for me. So let me not do it. Let me just take it easy today. They become lazy. So you don't get the aromas and the flavors that you want from yeast. So any brewery that's worth its salt will have to understand yeast at a very fundamental level. But that again means that there is very little that you can still understand, because even in the 21st century, we understand honestly very little about yeast metabolism. Very little. Right? Even today, in breweries, large or small, they put in the yeast and you're crossing your fingers and saying, please work, And so it happens all the time. It happens in our brewery, right? We are constantly facing issues with respect to yeast, even though we've invested for the last 15 years trying to cultivate our own yeast strains. And these yeast strains have now become like little children in our brewery. They're used to our environment. So if you take a Geist yeast strain and put it somewhere else, they'll be like little children in a different school. They're like, oh my God, where are my friends? What's happening? Where do I go? So they get lost.
Okay.
So you can also see yeast that live in colonies. You've got middle-aged yeast, young yeast, older yeast, and everything in between. You can see all this stuff happening. So yeast, by the way, is a critical component to beer making, but not just from the fact that it gives you ethanol and carbon dioxide, but also from the fact that it gives you these amazing aromas, which, if done right and controlled properly, can give you absolutely stunning results. A well-made Hefeweizen, for example, will give you banana, it can give you clove, and it can give you a balance of banana and clove.
Right.
But that's primarily about how many yeast cells you've added, how much of oxygen have you given it, what's the yeast strain and what's its genetics, right? And what's the temperature. So these are the kind of criteria you use in order to get those things. And just controlling that can change one or the other.
So if the whiskey is aromatic, it is tasting really good, the accolades go to the yeasts.
Well, not particularly. In the case of whiskey, I think the yeast job is give me alcohol.
Right.
Give me ethanol. Now you're going to take that, you're going to distill that out. Now, after your multiple distillations, you've got your heads, you've got your body, and you've got your tails, right? You keep your body, a little bit of the tails, and you get your blend that you need.
Right.
But at this point in time, if you taste the whiskey, it's not very pleasant. You can't drink. You can't drink it, right? Yeah. So now you put this into an oak barrel, right? Oak, by the way, consists of cellulose, which is 85%, and the balance is hemocellulose, lignin, and it is hemocellulose and lignin, and then a bunch of trace elements after that.
Right.
And I don't know exactly the order, but it's hemocellulose gives you like butterscotch, caramel, all those amazing kind of sugar-ish, reactions and flavor to the beer, to the whiskey. And then lignin gives it vanillin and pepper and spices.
Right.
So here, the star performer is basically your oak barrels.
Oak barrels.
Yeah.
But star performer in a beer brewery is the yeast.
Actually, all four. And it depends on which beer you want to showcase which ingredients. So, for example, in our Belgian wit beer called the Witty Wit, we add orange peel that we source from the West Indies.
Okay.
And coriander. By the way, there are hundreds of varieties of coriander in India, and that's the beauty of our country.
Okay.
So we get it from one small farmer in Gujarat, okay, which is a balance between resin, citrus, oily, non-oily, and everything in between. So we select one variety that is grown there, and we use that. In this case, with the wit beer, you're showcasing the adjuncts, which is the extra things that you add into the beer.
Right.
With the Hefeweizen, you're showcasing the yeast because you're getting banana and clove and a balance of both. In the case of our Uncle Dunkel, which is a dark wheat beer,
right,
you're showcasing the malt because you're using that chocolate that comes out of the malt that comes basically from the malt. And then in the case of the Kama Citra, you're showcasing the hops because you get mango, passion fruit, grapefruit, berries, all that stuff coming through, all because of the hops. So every beer showcases a different ingredient.
So when they say seasonal beer or a mango beer, so you're not adding mango to it, but you're adding yeast.
No. So
you're adding hops in that.
You can do, for example, you can make a mango beer. We make a Alfonso mango beer, which is Ratnagiri Alfonso mango puree added to a finished beer. Right. So you can do that. You can also add a particular type of hops to complement the mango and not overpower it. It's exactly like cooking, right? When you cook,
right,
You're looking at salt, sweet, spicy, sour, right? These four things that you have to have in balance. Same thing happens with the hops and what you add. So in a mango beer, typically you're actually just adding mango puree. You finish the beer, you add the mango puree, you mix it up, let it rest for a bit, and then you package it.
How much time does it take to make a beer?
Depends on the beer you make. So an ale, which is fermented at a higher temperature, which is 19 to 21 degrees, takes about 14 days. And then a lager, which is fermented between 11 to 17, 18 degrees, 17 degrees, will take about 21 to 25 days.
What's the weirdest ingredient you have ever infused in a beer?
For us,
Or when you were brewing back at Portland?
no, actually, the weirdest ingredient was here. We used kala namak and jamun, the berry jamun. And we made a kala namak jamun beer. And
How was it?
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. And so that you also have these happy accidents. You can screw it up big time, by the way, because you add. And again, the secret to making beer, again, is balance. So even if you make a spice beer, for example, the first sip might be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But get through the whole glass and then you tell me whether you like it or not.
Right.
So it has to be balanced. And so yeah.
So is craft beer heavier than the bottle beer, what we normally get in the market?
So
Or
craft beer can be in bottles, by the way. Craft beer can be in cans like us.
Right.
Mass market beers can be in bottles. They can be in cans. It all depends upon the category of beer that you're looking at. So the answer is
yeah.
So the answer is not necessarily. You can make a craft lager that is as light as a mass market lager. You can make, for example, a Kolsch, which is a German style beer that is as light as anything you would get in the market.
Right.
So the answer is not necessarily. But typically, and this is not true all the time, but typically craft is unpasteurized, and in many cases unfiltered, but also unpasteurized and filtered. But very, very rarely is it filtered and pasteurized. Very rarely.
Okay.
So therefore, in craft, you have residual yeast. And by the way, having residual yeast in the beer is good for you because it's vitamin B6, B12, chromium, selenium, magnesium, all of those things that are good for you.
I think it's about time beer should be included in the medicinal value.
Yeah, wishful thinking from us and you both.
Yeah. There's a lot of people say, can we have beer after working out? Because it has got, you get rehydration, it has got proteins, it has got other things as well. But too much of beer can lower your heart rate as well.
It's dehydrating too, right? Because it's got alcohol. So everything in balance.
You know, I was dubbing a show, was based in South Africa, and they would go to all the lovely breweries there. They'd take the beer and do braai for the entire staff there. It
Amazing.
was very refreshing show to dub.
Amazing.
You also got the entire fresh beer culture in India, and there were a lot of hardships. We'll talk about that, but before that, let's smoke our cigar of the day. It is Rocky Patel ALR, aged, limited, rare.
Amazing.
So the beauty of Rocky Patel cigars is like it says, aged, limited, rare. So he wants to age it and always give you premium stuff.
Oh, it smells brilliant.
Have you had this before?
Never had it before.
So, the beauty of this is tobacco has already been aged, of course. But after rolling the cigar, it was aged for 2 more years.
Amazing.
It's got a Mexican wrapper, San Andres wrapper, and Nicaraguan tobacco. How do you like your cigars? What kind of cigars do you like?
Delicious. So I think for me, I like these cigars kind of not too extreme. I like it kind of middle of the road and, the 6 inches, 7 inches types, nothing more. It just feels like I'm compelled to finish the cigar. So I have to finish it before. And so too much of it is also, it kind of gets to me. So I get very, very happy with a 6 inch. And
Or a 5 inch. You can
Or a
try,
5
you
inch.
can try the Robusto.
yeah,
I always love Robusto because first it is easy to handle
yeah.
and of course easy to finish as well.
What would this category fit in? This is a Robusto or a Toro?
This is a
in your
Robusto.
opinion? Yeah. This is a very nice size, by the way. And a brilliant cigar.
So the wrapper is San Andres wrapper, which came from Mexico. And your tobacco is Nicaraguan tobacco inside this.
Brilliant.
So you'll get the hint of those dark berries, dark chocolate, good coffee in this, roasted coffee.
I get coffee, by the way.
Roasted coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Coffee is the number one most identified smell on earth.
Is that right?
From anywhere you'll identify this is coffee, and anybody can identify that.
Amazing. I did not know that.
And whenever you're traveling or you're going somewhere in the morning, if you cross a coffee shop, it's
Recognizable.
divine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think then comes bakery, the bakery smell. But coffee is the most identified smell on earth.
Amazing.
What kind of cigar do you like?
Yeah, I tend to go towards the more full-bodied ones because I tend to appreciate those aromas a little bit better. So I would say fuller bodied, and then I would say maybe up to about 6 inches. And to me, happiness apart from beer is a nice single malt with a lovely cigar. And I just need to spend time by myself and enjoy the cigar like a good friend.
So what is the best time to smoke a cigar for you?
For me, absolutely in the evenings.
Okay.
I come back from work and then I have a bath and then sit down, get some music going, cigar, whiskey. I'm trying not to do this on a daily basis, but
Yes,
I try really hard not to do it. But the pull is there. And the thing about the cigar is, and the thing about whiskey is this: you do this once, and the next day you feel like doing it again and again and again.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to tell myself, pace it out, don't go overboard.
But what I understand about smoking cigar is you need a setting. And you need time. You need to give time to your cigar. You can't just sit and just huff and puff.
Yeah,
You need to sit. You need to enjoy
yeah.
the taste. And you can't just keep smoking. So you should have something else along with that. Like you said, music. Or some people read books along with that.
Yeah.
But why smoke a cigar? What is cigar for you?
To me, I remember in the early days, right? When I was at Intel, any successful project that we had, my boss, Tim Sweeney, would say, Manepally, let's bring out a cigar. So cigar in that case was about, hey,
Achievement.
you've achieved something,
Yeah.
right? And then I remember when I came to India, I was always passionate about cigars. So I would have a cigar and sometimes it was at work. And my friend Paul, who is not a cigar smoker, he would hold the cigar in his hand and he'd say, Manepally, quote me some big numbers. So it's like, to us, it's about achievement, it's about success, it's about doing something and kind of rewarding yourself for something that you've done that you're really, truly happy about, right?
Right.
And so that's how the cigar connotation came. Cigar to me is about achievement. It's about rewarding yourself for doing a good day's worth of work. And it was about, again, just the pleasure of having a good friend in your hand, if you might, and enjoying the moment, So that's what a cigar is to me.
Like what Sylvester Stallone says, well, one cigar is much better than smoking 20 cigarettes a day. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to enjoy a cigar when I come back.
Yeah. Completely agree. So yeah, it's about that to me.
What is the evolving culture of cigar you see around
In India,
in India?
I think there is, it's a little bit of either you hate it or you love it. There are people who will, if you're smoking a cigar, the smell of the cigar is just enough to kind of excite people or put them off completely. But of the people that love it, they'll come and say, oh my God, I just love the aroma of the cigar. Just please keep smoking.
Yes.
Even though they may not be cigar smokers themselves, right? So that happens. But I also see with India, now with India globalizing, people traveling all over the world, experiencing maybe initially a Cuban cigar. And again, same thing with them, right? For them, it's about, I need to reward myself. I worked hard. I've done this. I'm able to travel. I am successful. I've arrived, whatever it is, it might be. And so they've tried that maybe with their friends abroad, just like craft beer, by the way, right? And then they come back here and they say, hey, why can't I have the same thing here? And so having a cigar culture here, I think, is growing and burgeoning.
Right.
Primarily because India's GDP is the fastest growing GDP in the world. People's disposable income is growing. Premiumization is happening. And people are saying, let me reward myself because I've worked hard.
Right.
So, and again, that whole feeling of achievement, success, quote me the big numbers, man, because I've arrived type thing is what the cigars are. So I think India's cigar journey is at the very, very nascent stages. And it's only going to get more and more. It's going to get...
It's also something to do with spending time.
Yeah,
like if I'm out with friends,
Yeah.
if I can smoke a cigar, then I carry a cigar.
Yeah.
But if I'm going out somewhere and where you don't have a cigar smoking area or a smoking area,
Yeah.
then I don't carry.
That's right. That to me, the happiest moments for me smoking a cigar is by myself, with music, with my whiskey at home. Of course, my wife keeps saying, open the damn window and let the cigar smoke go out. But yeah, that's another
So
story.
you don't open the window?
I don't, because I want to enjoy the full flavor and the full...
You make the hot box and then smoke a cigar.
I don't open the window.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's
Wow.
just me.
So you pair your cigar with whiskey, that's what you said.
I do.
Have you tried it with coffee?
Never.
You can try it with filter coffee.
I'm gonna
or
go home tonight
black
and do
coffee.
Yeah. The only screw up is if I have coffee in the nights, I probably won't be able to sleep, but I'm going to try it anyways. So
That's why that is for morning or afternoon.
yeah.
Yeah. What about beers? Have you paired with beers?
I haven't actually tried it with Kama Citra, which
Okay.
is something I want to do. But I've never tried, I never thought that there was enough of a robustness, except for a stout, which I have tried once with a cigar.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I think if it's a barrel aged, to me, somehow whiskey and cigar is a match made in heaven. So in a barrel aged stout that we made, we called it the Stoutest Space 7 months or whatever,
Right.
11 months. That was nice because I felt like it was complementing the coffee, the chocolate, all that stuff that's coming from the cigar
Right.
with the barrel aged beers that we had.
That's why there is pairing with coffee, rum, whiskey. You can even pair it with Coke.
Interesting.
Not the Coke Zero, but normal Coke. You can pair it with Coke. Water, of course, should be there whenever you're smoking.
Yeah.
And beer, I have tried. Now, which beer do you think we should pair it with?
I think you should try that Uncle Dunkle because it's got like chocolate.
What is Uncle Dunkle? What is the...
Uncle Dunkle is so. By the way, Dunkle. So what we've tried to do, at least in our beers, is to kind of give the style of the beer and put that in the name. So Dunkel in Germany means dark, or in German means dark. And so you have two types. You have a Dunkel beer and a Dunkel Weizen. What you have in your hand right now is a Dunkel Weizen. It's a dark wheat beer.
Where the uncle is dark.
The uncle is just, I don't know, reference to somebody in Bangalore.
Dark uncle.
Yeah. Dark light, it's an uncle of some kind, but yeah.
His likings are very dark.
That's right.
And that's how you pour, right? Slowly till the glass.
You're doing an amazing job.
Get good head.
Absolutely. And typically when you reach the top, you should have a head that's 2 fingers deep.
Okay.
But
I think you'll get
near perfect.
Yeah, nice deep head.
Very nice.
There you go. All right, so we're gonna pair it with this. I think it's not chilled, that's why. But a nice...
No, I think that works. So
looks nice.
the first thing you do is when you smell it, right?
Wow.
You'll get that chocolate, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, caramel, cocoa, all that stuff.
I'm getting those plums. Nice plums on the foam.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. Now, you talk about senses. What were you talking about the senses? When you smoke a beer? When you drink a beer?
First off, you drink a craft beer with all your senses. So when you look at it, it should meet the promise of what the beer style is all about. For example, a Dunkel Weizen, which is a dark wheat beer, has to have haze. Okay, that's protein and yeast inside the beer, right? It has to have a specific color. So there's something called EBC, which is effectively a measurement of color through the European standards. It should conform to a range. It can't be too dark, it can't be too light, etc. Of course, a good head on the beer is always a very, very nice sight to see. And then the smell and the taste. So these are very, very gently hopped. And again, you're showcasing the malt. So all of the chocolate, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, caramel, cocoa, plums that you mentioned is all because of the malt. So you're showcasing the malt. And to me, a sign of a good pairing will be that neither overpowers the other.
Right.
So they just have to work together.
And then there's the fifth sense as well, which is very, very important. That is the sense of hearing.
Hearing too. When you click the glass. Yeah. By the way, typically in Germany, when you click a wheat beer glass, you click on the bottom.
Okay. Like this. Wow. Why do we do that? So that we don't break the glass?
Well, I normally, the whole concept of cheers was done because of mistrust. So you would have people clank their wooden things into each other, so it spills into each other's glasses just to make sure there was no poison and you're not killing your killing your guest, for example.
Yeah.
In Germany, they do it from the bottom. Truthfully, I don't know why, but it's done from the bottom. Maybe because the glasses are really tall and you hold it in a particular way, so it's easier to kind of just, yeah.
Wow. Well, it's a nice pairing. But the nicest thing...
It does work, doesn't it?
It works, yeah. Now, you did the typical thing. South Indian, studied engineering, did MBA abroad, settled abroad, working in Intel. But then you wanted to come back to India. You were into craft beer. When you came back, you said, let's give the taste of craft beer to Indians. But that beer was made in Belgium.
Yeah.
You were importing it because you faced a lot of difficulties dealing with the government and all. What was that time all about when you came to India and you wanted to give the taste of craft beer to India?
Yeah. So I think for us, Paul and I, the first thing we wanted to do was to open a microbrewery. So we went to went to the government of Karnataka, went to the excise department and said, hey, we want to start a microbrewery. They said, absolutely no way. There is no excise law that prohibits it.
It's illegal.
It's illegal. And by the way, the reasons for the illegality were also kind of weird. It was a 100-year-old British law that apparently, which was the basis of our excise policies that we formed, prevented you from brewing and serving under the same roof. For some reason, I don't know why.
I think it came from the UK because in UK
everything came from the UK as far as So
in 1700s people were brewing it at home and it was like cash for them. And there was a law which came and they were like, if anybody is brewing at home, we will fine them. That was the time when the streams of Scotland were filled with alcohol for 3 days.
when people dumped it.
People dumped it.
Yeah. But somehow, when you translate that to a commercial enterprise, you would assume that restriction would be taken out, but it wasn't for whatever reason. Anyway, so we went to Karnataka, we went to Goa, we went to Maharashtra. Everywhere they kept saying it's not possible, it's illegal, you can't do it, etc. And so we're like, shit, we're here. What do we do? And I had all these recipes that I'd made correctly or incorrectly. I had brewed hundreds of batches of beer in my garage.
Right.
And I have all these recipes. So what do we do with this? And so I have a couple of mentors who I look up to for guidance and stuff. And they said, hey, why don't you just take this abroad and get it made and do India's first reverse outsourcing model? We are outsourcing software from India,
Right.
but let's reverse outsource beer into India.
Okay.
I'm like, let's try it. So we went to Germany, met with a bunch of breweries. And in Germany, you have these very large breweries that make, one or two varieties of beer. And then you've got smaller breweries and literally mom and pop shops, but they make only one or two types of beer.
Okay.
And for us, craft also meant variety. So we're like, hey, 400-500 hona chahiye type thing, And we couldn't find a brewery that had a variety of beers. And we wanted to bring global styles of beer to India. So we said, let's just bring different kinds of beers. We'll do wheat beer, let's do a lager, let's do whatever, but variety hona chahiye. Then finally we found this one brewery in Belgium that was able to make these different varieties of beer for us. And I remember meeting the brewer, and the guy said, hey, we need to adapt your recipe for our process. It's not completely what we want, etc., etc. And I even remember this one thing. His name was Javier, was the brewer.
Okay.
And he said, Narayan, the process of making beer is... So I said, what is that? He said, control the yeast.
Control the yeast.
So he kept doing this all the time. So anyway, so for us, that moment was like, wow, it is also, you have to give yeast respect.
Yes.
You can't just take dried yeast and just dump it in and just make a beer. You need to understand yeast.
You need to
That's
pamper
how the
it
thought.
well.
You need to treat it well, right? Not even pamper, because pamper means that they will not do any work.
They will get lazy.
So you've got to give them zone of. So anyway, that entire thought process happened because of Javier.
Okay.
Anyway, we brought these bottles of beer in, and not knowing anything about money, finance, accounts, etc., we priced the beer. So Paul and I, at the heart, we're engineers. Like, okay, so here's your cost, and maybe this is what we have to sell it at, and stuff like that. And we little realized that we were literally wrapping 50 rupee notes on every bottle of beer that we were selling. We were losing money hand over fist.
Right.
And we were totally clueless. And money was going and going and going, and we had no idea what was happening. But anyway, what it taught us was, how do you get a cost card done with the government of Karnataka? How do you distribute this beer? How do you make sure that this beer is available in various restaurants across Bangalore at least? And we would literally go and fall at the feet of any friend that we had, any restaurant, saying, please keep our beers, please keep our beers. And that's how it started. But we always knew at that time, and this is the only thing I can take credit for, is the fact that we knew that this model can only work if we brewed in India.
Right.
Because paying 125% import duty on a beer was rubbish. It just didn't work.
But did you face any resistance when you came here? We'll get to the story that how you started brewing in India. But when you wanted to create craft beer in India, and you influenced Hyderabad, Gurgaon. They started making their own beers.
No,
after
actually,
that.
the truth is this. The first ever microbrewery to come up was a place called Rockman's Beer Island in Gurgaon.
Yes.
Okay. We had absolutely nothing to do with it except be inspired by it. We went.
I think the first one was LBW.
No.
Rockman Beer Island came in Leela.
No. It was in that mall there was some mall, Ambiance Mall or something. I remember going and
yeah.
it was like a whole floor.
Yes.
It was massive. That was the very first one. Credit to them. They became the reference point for every other state to say, okay, we can do the same thing, right? By the way, at that time, when we first went, we were even earlier than Rockman's Beer Island, but we didn't have the wherewithal or the money to kind of get laws influenced and changed. They set the example. After that, in Karnataka, I remember Beer Club, which is Arvind Raju.
Right.
He and I were constantly talking to the excise department. He actually had way better connections than I did. And he got the first license actually was Beer Club in Bangalore. We partnered and started 2 microbreweries of our own along with other people. Big Brewski, Big Brew Sky, and Brew Sky.
Okay.
Which were like incredibly successful.
Right.
And I remember that is the only time in my life I felt like a rock star, because here are these long lines of people waiting outside your restaurant, your brewery. And I was able to cut the queue because I was part of Big Brewski and Brewski, right? and that, people will let you in and let your friends in and stuff. And all this stuff happens only in movies, right? When you have these people kind of cutting queues to get in and stuff. Now, unfortunately for us, our relationship with the people at Big Brewski didn't work out. I keep saying Big Brewski because everybody says Big Brewski now, but it's actually Big Brew Sky.
Right.
And the word came from Big Blue Sky and Brewski. So it is supposed to be the Big Brew Sky.
Okay.
Anyway, things didn't work out, but there we learned 2 valuable lessons. By the way, if you have a group of 10, 15 people coming to your brewery, that's like gold, right? Because that's like huge billing.
Right.
And you would have these groups of kids who would come in, 10, 15 people. And I remember having a chat with Paul many years ago saying, you know what, man? India is the only country where people will come and say, give me a beer. And that beer is understood to be a Kingfisher. So I said,
of course,
the first thing we should do is actually have people ask for the beer by name. That's the first thing we want to do. So people would come and say, by the way, ironically, do you have your Dunkelweizen on tap today? And we would run out. And we were making 18, 20,000 liters of beer. Okay. And I was responsible. Our group, Geist, was responsible only for the beer. Nothing else. And if you say, no, we're out of the beer, they would just leave. They'd turn around and leave.
Okay.
Right?
They don't want any other beer.
They didn't want any other beer. They just wanted this beer. And the second thing that happened was people would come and say, Narayan, love your beers. Please make this available closer to where we live, because I hate this Bangalore traffic. And, all of us have experienced that at some level. So when we left the whole Big Brew Sky environment, we're scratching our heads saying what to do. But this customer feedback that we had said, can we do something different of making this craft beer available where people live and closer to them?
Right.
So why can't we convert restaurants, clubs, hotels, pubs into microbreweries without the investment? That's how this thing came about. Now, in Karnataka, microbreweries are not allowed to distribute beyond premise.
Right.
So I couldn't get a microbrewery license and then sell beers in kegs or cans. Couldn't do it. The only way we could do it was getting an industrial license. And this was a huge gamble because industrial licenses are not only expensive every year, but even to get that license involves a lot of money, right? So we took a gamble and we got the license and we started brewing the beers and we started trying to sell the beer. And 1 or 2 places said, okay, we'll take it. But majority of them saying, why we have Kingfisher? Why would we want your beer?
Right.
And we're like, no, please take it. There's the usual stuff all over again in kegs now happens.
So kegs started, if I'm not wrong, 2017, 2018?
August 5th, 2017 was the first keg that left our building. Yeah.
That's when I was in a pub and they were like, there's a new beer. Why don't you try this?
Yeah.
And I had
our very first place was a place called Locals in Kamanahalli. And remember when we sent the beers out there, all of us went. And now my business partner now is a person called Mohan. So Mohan, myself, our brewer Vidya, a bunch of us all went to the place to try it. And I can't tell you the pleasure that we had of this beer being served at a table in a restaurant that was not yours. And it's like, wow, this is amazing.
Did you face resistance from UB?
Not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all.
They were happy with that?
I guess we're too small, and
Okay.
I think, and by the way, the only reason I know this, Mr. Malia is an incredibly smart person. And apparently, and I only heard this through the grapevine, he had said, this is not a kind of business that Kingfisher wants to be in. Let entrepreneurs work on it, and then we'll pick some of these up
Right.
if they're successful. Now, clearly, history is, has pointed in a different
He
direction.
got
but
more into lifestyle because he wanted to, the image of selling alcohol.
maybe that,
wanted to clear
maybe, I mean, he had a bunch of other interests with respect to alcohol, meaning whiskeys and, all of that stuff. But I think this city owes him a huge gratitude for allowing draft beer to be sent directly from breweries to retail outlets without going through a government bonded warehouse. And so he convinced the government of Karnataka, saying this is fresh beer that needs to go straight from the factory to the outlet.
Right.
And it's benefiting all of us now. So, Mr. Malia, wherever you are, thank you.
He was the beer man of India.
Absolutely.
His father, to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I think father from a foundation perspective and then
Yeah.
from a flamboyance and kind of marketing perspective is all about
Right.
Vijay Malia, right?
The Kingfisher.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You set up business, you were distributing, facing losses, created business again. Where is the funding coming from? Where's the money coming from? You need a lot of money for that.
Yeah. I think in the early days, it was all self-funded. So whatever I had saved from Intel, I put into this. And that was every last bit that I had, I invested in here.
Okay.
And that was over $2 million worth. I just put everything in here because I said, if I'm not all in, then what am I worth? Right?
Right.
So did that. Of course, we were not very smart about managing money and accounts and finance and all that kind of stuff. Of course, we've learned our lessons about that. But that allowed us to set the foundation of doing something, whether it's bottles or starting two microbreweries or whatever else, which allowed us to get funding now from a bunch of absolutely marquee HNIs in India.
Right.
And they've been very, 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 very gracious in supporting us through our times. And now, by the way, craft beer is real, right? We get 3-4 phone calls a month saying, please have your beers available at our outlet, which is such a huge difference from the early days when we were begging for business.
Right. But paisa kahan se aaya? Who invested?
So we have a lot of investors. We've taken small amounts of money. What we were very clear was we do not want to take private equity and venture capital money in the beginning, because the feeling was, right or wrong, that they will push you in directions that are not what you want to do. So
Right.
we wanted to get small amounts of money
And do whatever
from
you
a
want
bunch
to
of
do.
investors who would leave you alone because they're not, it's not hurting their pockets and such. So it's not a big investment from one company or one person.
How do you get these investors?
Just
Who are
through
these
contacts.
investors?
Just through contacts. So I'll give you one example. Chris Gopal Krishnan, who is
Okay.
the founder of Infosys. This man hasn't touched a drop of alcohol in his life, and he's never smoked in his life. And I met him through another contact, another investor, by the way. And I went to him, and I went to his house in Koramangala. And then I had this presentation. I was sweating through the night trying to prepare these 15 slides, and every little T and I crossed and dotted, whatever. I opened up my computer, and his house, he's got a beautiful house, and in the front is like a little office area.
Okay.
And I remember I started the first slide, and he said, Narayan, close your computer, man. Just talk to me, he said.
Ah.
So I spoke to him. And then 15, 20 minutes later, he said, okay, I'll invest. So like that, we've had a lot of people who've believed not just in me, but in the concept of craft, assuming that craft, and rightly assuming that craft is going to become significant.
That was called Intel Inside. What is an IPA?
Okay.
A lot of people don't know IPA, and it's called Indian Pale Ale.
No, it's actually not Indian Pale Ale. It's India Pale Ale.
Huh.
So most people think that IPA was made by the British specifically for India, for their soldiers and their armed forces here in India. And that's actually not correct. And IPA, by the way, and a lot of people tell you that, the British brewers were smart. They added extra hops in the beer, and that hops allowed the beer to preserve and make the long journey from the UK to India.
Right.
And that's how it became IPA. The truth is, that's actually not the truth. Okay, the truth is this. In the early days, British royalty were the only people that were allowed to brew beer in their homes. Okay, and their staff in their house was making this beer in their homes. Now, British royalty liked their beers very dry. Okay.
Okay.
And in the 1800s, they discovered, and by the way, this beer was typically made in the month of October. So it is called October beer.
Okay.
October beer, in order to make this beer dry, they would actually add extra hops, because there were two British scientists who discovered this thing called hop creep. Okay, which, by the way, we are talking about now in 2024 and 2023. We're talking about hop creep. At the end of the day, what is hop creep? Hops, certain types of hops have an enzyme. That enzyme has the ability to break sugars, these unfermentable sugars, and make them fermentable.
Right.
So when you have this enzyme inside certain types of hops that break down these sugars, complex sugars, branch sugars, into fermentable sugars, you would have extra fermentation and the beer would dry.
So they act as a malt.
Not as malt.
The quality.
They're acting as an agent to make unfermentable sugars fermentable.
Okay.
Okay. So they're not. So the sugars came from the malt, but the process of cleaving these bonds and making them more fermentable happened because of the enzyme in hops. And it's called hop creep. It's a very real phenomenon, even today, by the way. Okay. And a lot of breweries deal with hop creep. Anyway,
Okay.
the point is, October beer was made by British royalty, and it was made dry, and they added extra hops to it. So it was a bitter beer by itself. Now, Bow breweries, okay, had special connections with the East India Company. Their brewery was not very far away. They would make an October beer. And in typical style, connections hai, to baat kar lenge unse. So let's go talk to them. So he convinced them to buy Bow Brewery beers to send to India. These were already hopped heavily. Okay. It just so happened that it worked for the journey because hops are polyphenols, they act as preservatives. And by the way, there is no reference to a pale ale until the 1920s. Okay. And in 1920s, why pale ale became real was because malt in the early days was dried using hay and straw and whatever else. Right? And so that was actually giving this beer color, right? Because you're getting soot and whatever else going into the malt.
Right.
British, by the way, invented coking coal, which is smokeless coal.
Okay.
They were using coking coal to now dry malt, and the malt would remain pale. So the reference for a pale ale that was bound for India happened only in the 1920s.
Okay.
And that's how the word India Pale Ale came about. It was not made specifically for India. It was a beer that was already being made by the British. It just so happened that connections happened to come to India, and it became India Pale Ale.
What a lovely story. Out of respect, I will have this beer, but I will not have it.
Well, it's right in front of you. You can try it. Yeah. But the amazing thing of the IPA is every IPA from every brewery is different. And that's what craft is all about. It's an experience that is so different and so unique.
Talk about beer and talk about Geist. Would you like to give us a discount code if somebody is watching or listening to this podcast?
Absolutely. The person to talk to is Jonah, who's sitting right behind me right now.
Should we give some code to it? Like if anybody's watching this, anybody's
Why not?
listening to this,
Yeah.
say Fume 20.
Jonah. There you go.
If anybody's saying or give you the code called Fume 20, you get 20% discount.
Done.
Done?
Absolutely no problem.
Please cut a reel of that. But what's the difference between ale, Hefeweizen, and stout?
So broadly, beers are classified into two main categories: ales and lagers. Now, if you look at a Hefeweizen is an ale, stout is an ale, right? It's just that you ferment these beers at, like I mentioned, higher temperatures with a specific strain of yeast called an ale strain of yeast.
Okay.
Lagers, of course, are now fermented with a different strain of yeast and at a lower temperature. However, in recent days, in recent days I mean in the last 50 years, 100 years, the crossover has happened. So you have ales that are fermented like lagers and lagers that are fermented like ales. For example, one of the most famous beers in the world was from Anchor Brewery in the US, which, by the way, unfortunately closed. They called it the Anchor Steam Beer. A steam beer is a lager strain of yeast fermented like an ale, right? A Kolsch, by the way, is a ale that's fermented like a lager at a much colder temperature. So broadly, you have now two main categories because there are connections kind of all over. Top fermented and bottom fermented. Top fermented typically are ale strains and bottom fermented are typically lager strains. But at the end of the day, they all kind of fall to the bottom anyway. So.
What is an ale? Where did this name come from? Ale.
So I think the genesis all happened from the UK because ales typically started in the UK. And it was a kind of beer that was actually used, it was a lower carbonation beer, and they fermented at higher temperatures because in the early days, it was the control of temperature was less, right? So these are the beers that the British made, and stouts was an ale, right? And so ale became a terminology that was used generically for beer. That was made in the UK, and
because this I've seen in the UK that there is a separate tap for ale, and they serve vermouth as well,
right?
And there's a separate tap for that as well.
Yeah.
Why do we have so less tap rooms in India? And the beer community, the beer gardens, we don't have that in India much.
I mean, it's coming. So, for example, in Bangalore alone, you have 86 craft breweries right now, and across India now 300. Which 5 years ago was maybe 1/10 that number. Right? Maybe 1/5 that number. But it's happening. So if you look at craft beer today, it's growing at 70%, give or take. And you look at mass market beers, which typically tend to be strong lagers that are sold in the rural areas, that are growing at about 3, 4, 5% in that range, give or take, right? I'm just giving you broad numbers. So the fact that craft is still a very, very new, nascent phenomena for India, I think we've done pretty damn well for the fact that in the last 5 years, we've added a plethora of new breweries, both distribution like ours, as well as microbreweries like what exists today in Bangalore. So it's coming. And the fact that craft is going to be, my hope and prayer is that in the next 5 to 7 years, if we are at least 5% of the overall market, that would be a fantastic achievement for the category.
Do you call yourself the leader in craft beer in India?
No,
because
I think
you were the ones who crafted beer outside and then imported that.
I think we were pioneers, but are we leaders? I measure leadership by how we measure ourselves, and I know we've got a long way to go. Right? We've got a ton of learning to do. A long way to go. And when we are truly at a leadership position, and leadership is not just sales of beer. It's not just volume of the number of liters of beer you sell. It's not about the variety of beers that you make. It's about being truly top class, right? In your own head when it comes down to making styles of beer.
But since you're the pioneers, do you think that, yes, that has helped us? In the long run?
I think, I hope.
Do people come to you and ask you how to do this business?
All the time. But I hope that as pioneers, we've inspired a whole bunch of people to get into the craft space, not just because of the fact that there is money to be made, but because they're truly passionate about this and want to bring great beers and bring accolades to the country. I want India to be on the map, just like Germany or just like the United States or Belgium for that matter. Why the heck cannot we be world leaders?
Right.
Right? We have the capacity. We are smart people.
We have all the resources.
Everything. And by the way, we have more resources than many of these countries put together.
Right.
We have it. We have entrepreneurial spirit. We have smartness. We have ingenuity. We have everything. So leadership will happen when Geist gets recognition on the global stage, where we win awards against every other category of beer that is there in multiple categories, not just one. So it's a tall ask, but let's see.
When did you have your first beer?
So rumor has it that I was maybe a year old, a year and a half old, sitting on my father's lap in Jamshedpur at the Gulmohar Club and watching the fireworks. And my dad had a glass of beer in his hand. And when he took the next sip, it was empty. So clearly I've drunk it. So I was 1.5.
And the memory you have?
The memory I have is when I was in college and coming from a conservative family. Of course, alcohol was taboo and you're not supposed to drink and all that kind of stuff. But I remember at the age of 18 or 17, you were in, pre-university / college, whatever, and going to a bar and having a Kingfisher beer. And that was my first memory of it. But it was like this achievement. First off, you couldn't afford it, but you tried to kind of pool money together from a bunch of friends and buy one 650 ml bottle of beer that you tried. Yeah.
My first memory is I think I was in a concert and I never used to drink and all. And I think some seniors next to me, they were drinking. And I had a Coke glass in my hand. And they poured some beer in the Coke glass. And I drank it and I was like, dude, it's a good taste. And majorly started drinking after college. And I remember we were 4 friends. We split one bottle of beer amongst 4 of us. And we were like, ye to badi gandi hai, hame nahi peeni. We can't drink this. But later on developed the taste. As I said, the first glass of chilled beer is divine.
Yeah.
You never say no to beer.
I can completely get that feeling.
Yeah.
I remember my first craft beer though. I was with Intel. I'd never had a craft beer before. And this was in Oregon. And there's this brew pub, this beautiful place called McMenamins, Cornelius Pass Roadhouse and Brewery by the McMenamins brothers.
Okay.
And they had like large number of establishments across Oregon. And we went to this place called Cornelius Pass Roadhouse and Brewery. And I had a beer called Ruby. It was a raspberry ale. Wow. So they had infused raspberry puree into an ale. I was just like, wow, this is something else. So that was my first experience of that beer.
Now, the first craft beer for me was Rothman Beer Island.
Right.
In Gurgaon.
Right. And I have to tell you, they made some really nice beers, by the way. It was really nice.
They did.
Really nice. I remember drinking there saying, wow, this is actually really good. I remember that.
And then there was something really cool I had in London. It was the mixed fruit cider. Mixed berry cider. You put ice, you put berries in that, and you put that liquid.
Wow.
It was just amazing. Copperberg.
What's the name of the place?
The name of the brand.
Copperberg.
Copperberg cider.
Wow.
Super. What's the craziest beer memory you have?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this.
Say it. It's a podcast. You can say whatever. You can name the mantri also who asked for 4 crores.
No. Definitely not. I definitely will not do that. But I remember, and again, this is the stupidity of youth, where I remember driving after drinking a lot of beer, and in front of me was an auto rickshaw, and I could see 3 of them, and I was aiming for the one in the middle, and I was driving. Stupid idea, but that's what I did. And I look back at it and say, oh my gosh, how the heck did I survive that? So for those of you drinking, And driving, please don't.
Please don't. Yes.
Yeah.
Because you might be right, but the other person is
No,
not
no, no.
right.
It was a stupid idea. But that's the
Yeah.
craziest memory that I have, which is 3 autos in the front, and I didn't know which one was the right one. It was bad. But yeah.
And this is the fact that if you meet with an accident, if you hit your car, you hit someone, or you get hurt, you won't get insurance at all.
Yeah.
No medical insurance, no car insurance, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's the way it should be. But truthfully, sometimes I feel lucky to be alive because we did some really stupid things as youngsters.
Like what?
Like that. What I just mentioned. It was just stupid. I had no business doing this. And yeah, anyway, it is what it is. But
How often do you work on new recipes, and are there new kind of beers coming in the market?
yeah, so I think, the challenge for us as a distribution craft brewery, which means we can distribute craft beer outside of our premises, is the following, which is keeping up with the demand of the beers that we are known for. These beers that you're sitting in front of you right now,
Right.
which is the Witty Wits, the James Blonde, the Uncle Dunkel, Kama Citras of the world, right? And then keeping customers' interest alive and excited by new launches. Now, there's a fine line. You do too many and people get confused, like, what the heck is going on? You do too less and people say you're not innovative enough. So it's a challenge. Right now, we do, I would say, maybe once in 6 months is when we introduce a new kind of beer. I know the sales team and the hospitality team would like to see many more innovative products. But today we are max capacity. We just are unable to keep up with capacity, which is a great problem to have. But at the same time, it's terrible because you can't do innovative beers because you just have to. So we keep pushing out anything innovative that we have to do. By the way, the latest one was the barrel aged stouts that we did, which turned out to be absolutely magnificent. It was just fantastic
Right.
beers, really good. I wish we could do more, but as a production brewery, you need to focus on your core products as bringing in the money. And of course, you need to have this fine line between not confusing customers too much, at the same time being regarded as innovative. So
What's the best or the weirdest flavor you have had? Like, people make mango beer, you made jamun beer with
Yeah.
kala namak and all. But what's the weirdest beer you have had, and where did you have it?
it was in the US. So anything extreme is in the US. I've had the craziest beer I had was birthday cake beer. So they actually shoved in an entire birthday cake into a beer.
Okay.
And I'm not so sure, but it was weird, but it was a beer.
No, Glenn Morangi came out with birthday cake edition.
Is that right?
It was horrible.
It was horrible. Interesting. I
Very,
never
very
had it.
sweet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think that it was too sweet for me.
yeah.
But I guess there are a lot of people that like sweet beers, but it's not my kind of style. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's the craziest beers that I've had.
What is your entrepreneur mantra which you would want to share?
I think there are multiple that I go by. Number one is success happens despite you, not because of you, right? With every success that you have, you should get more and more humble, not cocky, right? You need to basically, passion alone is not enough. You need to have the focus and discipline of doing this day in and day out, doing it day in and day out, dealing with whatever adversity comes your way and looking at that as an opportunity. Okay, that's the third thing. Fourth thing is, I think I'm learning this as we go along, which is get a thick skin. Okay, it's not personal, it's professional. So if people kind of say bad things about you or your beer or whatever, it's fine. It's an opinion. You vent it and you let it go. I remember in the early days when we got negative reviews in the hospitality thing, we'd take it really personally and like, oh my gosh, this is all going on and stuff. And, if somebody complains and gives you a 1-star because there's no garlic bread with the pizza, I mean, it's like, it's okay. It's fine. It is what it is. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And by the way, I think the last one I would say is, no, there are two more. The last but one is that be a sponge. Just take in as much as you can learn, because there is never enough that you know. You can always keep learning. And the last one, oh shit, I forgot the last one. Never underestimate the power of luck.
Right.
So you just have to be, do everything you can, but just hope and pray that luck is on your side.
Are you superstitious?
No.
Spiritual?
Spiritual, yes.
In what sense?
I think, so since we started making beer, I stopped believing in God.
Okay.
Because I believe that the only true God that we have is Mother Nature. Because everything that you have, everything that you get, the God that we define is around you. So, we started doing a lot of stuff that's eco-friendly in a true sense of the word, not just saying it, by the way. For example, 90% of our wastewater in the brewery is recycled, right? All of our spent grain is recycled. All of our sewage treatment plant water is used, it's treated and used for watering the gardens.
Okay.
The compost that comes, the sludge that comes out of a sewage treatment plant is then composted and sent to a farm as a fertilizer. So Mother Nature is your true God, right? So I am spiritual from the fact that I believe Mother Nature gives you everything that you need. So treat it well, because that's the only thing that you have. That's giving you life and sustaining you. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got certain myths which can be broken. And what do you think about this? The first myth is, of course, there is glycerine in this, which affects the gut.
Not true.
No?
No. So what people say, I think a lot of people's opinion is formed by the fact that somebody took a Kingfisher bottle and kind of poured it into a glass, and they had that little liquid come through, and they said that's glycerine. It's not. It's just glycerol. It comes because of the natural process of fermentation. Every beer has it. You take a Geist beer, you take a Kingfisher, you take a Corona, everything's going to have it. So it's all sensation and hype and stuff like that. By the way, to add that much of glycerine in the beer will cost you more than the raw material of the beer itself. So not happening.
So it's not glycerine, it's glycerol.
Glycerol happens because of fermentation.
I think somebody said it wrongly, and
I think, a lot of these things are sensations that are created, and somebody says it because they don't understand it. And they say it, and it becomes like it goes viral and whatever else for maybe the wrong reasons. But it's not bad for you at all.
Health-wise, how much beer is okay to consume?
Everything in moderation. And you define what moderation is for you. Some people will say half a glass, some people will say 3, but it should be in moderation.
Dark beer is stronger than the light beer.
Not true. You can make a dark beer light out of less alcohol. You can make it really strong. You can do everything in between.
Beer cures dehydration.
Absolutely not. Beer makes you dehydrated.
It clears your stones, basically.
It helps because at the end of the day, 85%, you can clear your stones by drinking lots of water. Okay, so.
Beer from cans, bottles, and draft all taste different.
This is true. And I'll tell you why. So if you look at a can and you look at a bottle, just take these two things for a bit. Every bottle has a neck, and you'll notice that no beer is filled to the top in a bottle, because it's 330 ml. You fill 330 ml. The neck of that bottle, the empty space, is about 18 ml. Okay, in a can, it's 9 ml. So the biggest enemies that beer has are light, time, temperature, and oxygen. Now let's look at oxygen. If you have 18 ml of space and 9 ml of space, you have double the amount of possibility, or double the possibility of having oxygen. No matter which brewery it is, you will get dissolved oxygen in the beer.
Right.
The point is to bring it down to the minimum. In a bottle, you have 18 ml. In a can, you have 9 ml. So you have double the chances of having oxygen inside your beer. Double the oxygen, half the shelf life.
Okay.
Mota. Okay. Number 2, time. You can only hope and pray that somebody buys your beer quickly, because if it's going to go beyond a certain shelf life or best before date, the beers are not going to taste great, whether it's in a can or a bottle.
We'll get a good discount though, 1+1.
Possibly. We don't do it, but others do. Thankfully for us, our beers are selling. Yeah. Third, it is light. Okay. Now, a can, 0 light penetrates. Whereas in a bottle, you will have, no matter how dark the bottle is, the refractive index of a glass bottle
will pass
will
through.
allow some light to pass through. And the biggest challenge is UV light between 350 and 550 nanometers. It will break carbon hydrogen bonds that you have because of true hops that you have. And that's going to create a cardboard smelling beer, because that's what,
So you're
chemistry
saying
does.
we should have canned beer, not bottled beer.
I would prefer a can, because
Okay.
I think a canned beer, at the end of the day, cans also have some disadvantages, but they also have a lot of advantages. One of the other advantages that a can has, which is why we've gone strictly cans only, we don't do any bottles, is when you put it in the fridge, youngsters today want instant gratification. They want that damn beer to cool quickly.
Yeah.
A bottle is going to take time.
Yeah, of course.
So the whole, and by the way, branding, I can do a ton of more branding on this than I can do on a bottle, right?
But why don't you like drinking straight from the can?
Because I just think you drink a craft beer with all your senses, and the only time you can fully appreciate all of the stuff that a craft beer has to offer is in a glass.
Okay.
So always pour your can into a glass. And by the way, when you're drinking a craft beer, also swirl the last 20% and put that into the glass, because there is residual yeast that causes the taste to change. Always swirl and pour.
Beer is good recovery drink after workout.
Agreed. Because it has...
You agree?
Yeah. It has carbohydrates. It's got... And unfiltered, unpasteurized beers have vitamin B2, B6, B12, chromium, selenium, magnesium, all of that stuff that's good for you. Whereas a filtered, pasteurized beer is just pure calories. So
And beer gives you beer belly.
anything is going to give you beer belly if you do it in excess. You eat too much of rice, you're going to get beer belly. You have too much of sugar, it's going to get a belly. All
Right.
of that stuff. So truth is, everything in moderation. Yes, it has carbohydrates, but it has a 500 ml can has about the same amount of calories as a 60 ml pour of alcohol of whiskey,
Okay.
right? Or a 180 ml pour of wine. It's about the same. Don't overdo it. Enjoy it. Spend
Yeah.
time with it. It's your friend.
More hops means more bitterness.
True. Because again, it depends on where you also add the hops. For example, every brewery, by the way, in the world has a hot side where all the hot operations take place, and the cold side where all the cold operations take place. Now, if you add more hops in the boil when you're making the beer, it's going to be like adding chai and boiling it for a longer period of time. You will get more kadak chai. So same thing is going to get a more bitter beer.
Right.
On the cold side, you can do something called dry hopping, which is to add hops and the last stages of fermentation or after fermentation, right? That will give you more aroma, but it'll also give you a little bit of bitterness. So true, more hops means more bitterness.
And more beer can give you lower heart rate,
No.
and it can lead to heart attack.
Anything done in excess is going to give you a heart attack. You work out too much, you sleep too less, you're going to get a heart attack anyway, so it's fine. Might as well have a good beer, because truthfully, everything done in moderation, that's what it's all about balance.
You play golf as well.
I used to.
You used to. You don't play anymore.
I don't have the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of talks happen? I know there's a lot of business talks happen at a golf course. There are only two places where you can have a quiet business talk. One is a golf course. Second is a long haul flight. And a lot of people do that. They take long haul flight from India to US, business class, sit together and talk business.
Yeah.
Only for that.
Honestly, on both those occasions, I haven't had a good conversation, because when I'm on the golf course, I'm like, damn it, I sliced that ball and went in a different direction, and I'm cursing myself for the most part. But I have to tell you, the time that I've played the best golf is when I'm slightly buzzed with 2-3 glasses of beer. I'm a lot more relaxed. And on a long haul flight, I'm asleep. So
what kind of talks have you had on golf course? Have you had a business talk or something, or a fight or something?
not particularly, no.
Do you fight?
No.
Do you lose your cool?
Not on the golf course, no. I lose my cool on myself, but not on my friends.
And on your staff?
By the way, I don't know if you know this or not, but Mark Twain said the definition of golf is a long walk spoiled. Yeah. But truthfully, for me, I'm so critical about myself that on the rare occasion that you hit a good shot, and by the way, I'm not a good golfer, so I played, in the US, but after coming here, I haven't.
What's the bizarre request you have got from a customer?
Whether I'd be available for... So one woman approached me and said, I'd like to give you as a gift to my friend's birthday.
Wow. Then, did you wrap yourself up?
Are you kidding? I have a wife at home. That's a pain enough. So
You should say this is business.
no. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But yeah. Please edit that out. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Seriously.
But why?
I don't know. I was at this was at Big Brew Sky, by the way, and I was around the brewery, and there were these bunch of like 8-10 women in the corner near the brewery, and clearly they were having a birthday party, they're singing happy birthday songs, and this woman suddenly comes towards me, and we had a bar by the water body, and she said this. Right. I'm first off shocked, a little bit flattered too, by the way, but shocked, and then I said, I'm married, thank you very much, I can't do it.
What a sweet gesture by the lady.
Oh no.
You broke her heart.
No.
Her friend's heart, rather.
I am sure she found better.
I think that's the way to approach a person, because her friend must have liked you, and she was like, I want to give you as a gift to her. She went overboard and said,
whatever it is, I never got to experience it, so I don't know.
So you cook, you make cheese, you make beer. So are you the ideal husband?
No, far from it.
No?
Far from it. Poor thing, my wife puts up with a lot of my crap. So I enjoy cooking because I think, to me, the most relaxing thing is when I cook with a glass of beer.
Right.
I just love it. I love it.
It helps.
Yeah. It just calms me down. And again, even just like beer, food has to be driven through science. So I'm in search of that perfect bun for our burgers at our outlet. And to me, by the way, the most perfect bun that's ever made is called Martin's Potato Roll from the US. And that bun is used by Shake Shack in the US. And you have to experience that. It is divine.
I've seen those are small buns. Those are not very big buns.
They're not very big.
The Shake Shack burgers are like handy and
they've got enough, give when you eat it. They're soft, but they also hold their shape. It's just brilliant. And honestly, for me, a bun is about making sure the patty gets its day in the sun.
Right.
It should not interfere with the taste of the patty. And the Martin's potato roll is another level.
That was a great talk. History lesson, chemistry lesson, biology lesson, life lesson.
Thank you. Loved it. I love being here.
It was lovely to talk to you. And thank you for coming on the Fume Lounge.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Well, the man who got craft beer, who are the pioneers in craft beer in Bengaluru, Narayan. Lovely to have you on the Fume Lounge. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.